Hey guys, it's Willow. It's really, I don't know if you say late at night or early in the morning, but I have been trying to edit the next two videos you're going to be seeing. Well, this one, which is part one of Grand Finals, and then the next one is part two, which is Losers, and then the actual Grand Finals. My hope was to kind of condense it down and make it seem kind of like the Watch Point pre-shows bit, where it's kind of a more of an analysis with gameplay footage and that. Uh, Unfortunately, with uh, my schedule, I haven't been able to edit it properly the way that I wanted it to. Uh, I was able to get this part condensed down half length. It was a little over an hour long, and I was able to get it down to about 35 minutes. And I was able to get the gameplay footage for Philly, London up, but the rest of it, I really just didn't have the time for. For that, I apologize. Some of the footage of the Pick'ems website is gonna might jump around a little bit. I think in this one, that wasn't the intention. And for that, I apologize for the kind of lackluster quality of this. I was really hoping to have the time to do this, but this weekend I'm working the entire time, and I know it's going to be really hectic, and I'm not going to have the energy to do it. So I'm just deciding to release it a little earlier with a bit of a less decent production quality, which I'm not happy about, but I kind of can't re-record it. So hopefully you understand, and let's go on to Grand Finals 2022. I'm going to bed now. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the grand finale, the grand finals of the Overwatch League. I'm back here with Rud for the final time of the year. What are your thoughts going into playoffs?
Oh man, I am super excited as you can tell by my voice. Everything in this grand final seems like the accumulation of everything that the first season of Overwatch League 2.0 has just it's going to be the end of it and the beginning of a new era. Finally, we'll see the Overwatch League start to evolve and maybe pick up some more traction because Overwatch 1 kind of left Overwatch League in a not so great spot. But I think this year is when we turn around and we'll probably see some big numbers tune into the Overwatch 2 grand finals. But, that's enough said about the performance of it. I think the games that are going to be shown are really going to be some of the best we've seen in Overwatch 2, which, I mean, we've only had one season of Overwatch 2 to look at, but this is just the best of the best coming together.
I don't know, this season's really just been probably the most level that the Overwatch League has ever been. Uh, Obviously, there's teams that weren't on the same level. Vancouver, Paris, Nixel, Boston, Valiant, Charge. But outside of those few select teams, it always felt like anybody could beat anybody. Most matches were really close, and even ones that were 3-0s, they were always fairly competitive matchups throughout it all. And I think that this year kind of proved just how great of a game Overwatch 2 is. This is going to be split up into a couple parts. We're going to be doing the winners bracket and then the losers bracket with grand finals, because we don't want to have a couple hour long video. So I'm going to try to keep it a little bit split. First up, we want to start off the weekend with a playoffs rematch, but all the way back in 2018, as we see the Philadelphia Fusion taking on the London Spitfire. How do we see this going, honestly? Because right now the Fusion do not have Zest. Zest is still injured. No updates have been provided so far, but people are speculating it's a pretty serious injury, meaning he's not going to be in playoffs. Does that really have much of an effect on the Fusion? Because, looking at the meta, we still have, it's expected that Zest would be filling in the role of playing Genji, Tracer, or Sombra. But right now with Carpe, they're really only limited to Tracer and Sombra. I think that is going to have a little bit of effect, but what do you think? Because I think that both of these teams are somewhat struggling coming into playoffs.
Yeah, I think both these teams are very evenly matched. That's pretty much what I have to say about them. I think Fixa being there is definitely a detriment to Fusion because they don't have the flexibility he brings to the roster. But as a whole, they can still function properly. They can just have Carpe in and play some of the more Sojourn based and possibly with a Tracer or Sombra. But I don't see them straying too much away from that. But the meta's in a good place where they can play that against Spitfire. But I think Spitfire is going to be at full power. I think that's what gives them the edge necessarily. Like, because I think Spitfire are a bit of a wild card going into this. They're going to be a lot less predictable than the Fusion. And I think even in a close series, I think they're probably going to win.
Yeah, I do have to agree. Uh, London is looking a little shaky going into this, but they're still a incredibly strong unit. Probably one of the most surprising teams of the season, especially with how they performed last year. Personally, myself, I do think this is also going to be a very close series. I'm predicting to go map 5, but I'm thinking it's going to go in the way of the London Spitfire as well. Next up, though, is the Hangzhou Spark and the Shanghai Dragons. Another matchup where one of these teams look a lot worse than the other when it comes to like a first glance. The Hangzhou Spark, after the kickoff clash, started to fall off a little bit, and especially after the midseason madness, they completely crumbled and they just kind of fell apart. Going into Countdown Cup, they replaced Super Rich and Irony with Teru Neko. A bit of a weird choice, and we were never given a reason as to why that was. And I think that that's going to have a huge play in this matchup because the Spark are playing at the biggest disadvantage of any of these teams right now, and I think that's going to be to their detriment.
Yeah, but even if Spark was playing at their best, it's still not enough to beat the Dragons, who is probably going to be at full power. They had a bit of a weaker showing in the last season, but as we can look to previous seasons, for example, like season 4, like season 3, most of the teams that kind of fell off in the last quarter of the season, they ended up picking up back to normal for the grand finals, because I think, generally speaking, most of these teams are going to be winning their A games, and I think the Dragons are going to be no exception.
Yeah, I think it is pretty clear that the Dragons are going to be winning this. I mean, even from previous matchups, when Spark were at their highest, they still couldn't beat the Dragons. And ever since the Summer Showdown, they haven't been able to get close. And I got to give it a pretty definitive 3-0 for the Dragons. And I'm assuming that's what you're also predicting?
Yep, that's what I had.
Moving on now to the other half of the winners round one, we have the Florida Mayhem and the Atlanta Reign. Florida is a team that has given a big surprise of a performance the past 2 weeks. They beat the Toronto Defiant in a 3-0. Then they beat the Houston Outlaws 3-1. And then they completely dominated the play-ins. To me, the Florida Mayhem are looking to be a really terrifying team going into the playoffs. That being said, Atlanta is no slouch when it comes to their playoff matches. I mean, look at last year. They were not the team that everyone was afraid of, and yet they made it to grand finals. Could that be a repeat this year? I mean, what do you like? Is there? Do you feel like that could be the case here?
Well, I think looking at some prior meetings between these two teams, there's something between them that always makes these matches like very good rivalries. Like they're very good at trash talking each other, and they're very good at, just delivering us some good games, and sometimes some not so good great games. Generally, I think Florida, they look to be better than Atlanta in this tournament coming in from the play-ins. I know they didn't really face many strong opponents from the play-ins, but even in their last week, they look really strong. And I just had this feeling that Reign are going to go and be the team that doesn't play up to par. Just a multitude of feelings, not really based on fact, that I think Florida's probably going to take it in a relatively convincing fashion, which I know is probably going to be a more hot take.
I don't know, because for me, this is a really hard one to predict. Atlanta is a phenomenal team, and Florida's looking to be a much better team, reminiscent of their kickoff clash performance. Personally, myself though, I think that it's just been like a lucky schedule for the Florida Mayhem. While I think the Florida Mayhem are going to have a close matchup to the Atlanta Reign, I think that I have to give it to the Reign in a 3-1 victory. What was your score? Uh,
I hit it 3-0.
uh, to close out round one, we have the Houston Outlaws and the Toronto Defiant.
Let me
Going,
speak for this one, because gosh dang, have we seen this match so much? Like we've seen it in like the previous tournaments. We saw it like literally 2 weeks ago. Like they can't not show us Toronto Defiant versus Houston Outlaws. We see it every time. And every time has been no surprises, and Toronto Defiant has come out victorious a number of those times. But I'm just gonna spoil it right now. I think Houston are going to finally get the revenge in the time that they need to most in grand finals. Toronto came out of the losers bracket in the play-ins, which means they are probably the worst team in the playoffs, other than maybe the Spark. I think there is not really much denying that. Toronto Defiant are probably the most mid, as they are often described. And, you know, if everyone does bring their A game, Houston will be able to beat the Defiant. Like Dante is going to definitely do very well, probably better than Hot, but on the characters we'll likely see as tanks. I think Dante is a better Zarya, or maybe not a better Diva, but certainly a better Zarya in my opinion. And I think Houston Outlaws at the peak are just better than the Defiant.
yeah, because you also have to think going into this. Houston has some of the highest ranking players in the league. You know, I've talked about it before with Merritt being one of the best sojourns in the league. If not, he was pretty much number one in every statistic for Sojourn at a point. Pelican as well being one of the best Genjis, able to pull out the Sombra as well. Like this team has they have all the pieces to take this entire season. And that's what's so frustrating about it, because you know it's the Houston Outlaws and you know their tournament performances, the times that they did make it to tournaments. But I do agree. I think that this is a Houston game. I gotta say it is gonna be a close game. I am also gonna predict it in map 5, just like the first match. But I think that this might be Houston's time to prove themselves as being a top threat.
Well, proving yourself as a top threat and going map 5 against the literal
Yeah,
worst team in the playoffs doesn't really go together.
I mean, it's definitely a possibility. That's the thing, is like these matches have always been bangers, and regardless, I think it's going to be. Houston needs to build that momentum, and I think that this we're going to start it, and hopefully, it doesn't stop at any point soon. Alrighty then. Now we move on to the team selection show? I guess you could. I don't know. The top four seeds get to pick who they want to face in round two. The first team that gets their choice is the Dallas Fuel. Who do you think it is, and why do you think it's going to be the Houston Outlaws?
Well, I think most teams want to actually consider themselves to be the first title or the first Grand Finals champion Overwatch 2. I don't think we're gonna get any funny rivalries like the Dallas Fuel pick Houston Outlaws for Battle of Texas. No, we're gonna get the Dallas Fuel picking a relatively safe pick, probably being the London Spitfire. Because, I mean, they're not the worst team out of selection, maybe. I think you can make arguments for some of the other teams that you can pick, but they're definitely not the best. And I think they don't really have a highest reputation. I think Spitfire never been able to really beat the Fuel, and I think that confidence is going to allow them, uh, or allow the Fuel to pick them.
Personally, I think they're going to be taking the Houston Outlaws. This is something that has plagued the Dallas Fuel this entire season, is a land victory against the Outlaws. And what better time for the Dallas Fuel to get that victory than on the grandest scale of the Overwatch League in the playoffs? I think these two have always had really great matches when it comes to this year, and hopefully they deliver again. That's kind of my own thought. Like, my other prediction for this would be the Shanghai Dragons. I think that Dallas could pick either Houston or Shanghai.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking for a team of Fuel's caliber, I think if they weren't going to go for the weakest team, I feel like the other strategy of just picking the strongest option and getting them out of the way, like Shanghai Dragons have done in a previous tournament, that is a strategy that they could do by just picking dragons and sending them to losers instantly. Is that risk worth it though? That's up
I
to
mean,
them to
Dallas has a
decide.
reason to pick just about every team that's available outside of London, even London. I mean, you could pick Shanghai, who's clearly the scariest team here. You could pick the London Spitfire, who's the weakest team there. You could even take Atlanta for the reason of they want to send Atlanta to the losers bracket to hopefully get picked off as fast as possible, so that the same thing that happened last year where they got knocked off and they took Dallas out of grand final possibility. Like, they want to be able to try to take Atlanta out as quick as possible, and then there's obviously the battle for Texas. Dallas has a reason to pick every team here, and that's what makes us so unpredictable. But personally myself, I'm going with the Houston Outlaws. So next up, though, for the team to pick is the San Francisco Shock. I think that this is where London gets picked. Just because Shock is going to be looking for the weakest link, that being the London Spitfire.
I also think that Shock's going to be picking the weakest link, but since they can't have the London Spitfire, I think the next weakest team on my list is the Florida Mayhem. And even though I have them winning 3-0 against the Reign, if they were, I think it definitely because, you know, the Reign wouldn't be up to par or something like that. And I mean, generally in terms of like seeding, Florida is pretty low, and I think they much rather face Florida than either Houston and definitely over Shanghai.
So then, lastly, the Gladiators are the only ones that are the last ones that get the freedom of choice. As I have them being able to pick the Shanghai Dragons and the Atlanta Reign. Personally, myself, this is another hard one because I mean, Gladiators are a team that like to pick a challenge, which is why I think they are going to go with the Shanghai Dragons, which is clearly the hardest threat and something that Gladiators are probably going to want to get rid of as soon as they can.
As much as I really love APAC versus NA games, I feel like again, Gladiators are gonna go to the safest option, not wanting to get any possibility of getting knocked out in winners. And, they're definitely gonna pick the Houston Outlaws over the Shanghai Dragons. It just makes common sense to pick the Houston Outlaws because who wants to face the Dragons? They're clearly the best of the winners round one picks by a mile. And I think Houston Outlaws themselves are just a good matchup for Gladiators. Gladiators have generally had a good read in Houston, and all of their players are generally top tier in each position. I think both in tank and support, they easily beat the Outlaws. DPS is pretty even now, but like I said, tank and support is really what matters. I think most of the time.
And lastly, I mean, Seoul gets stuck for me with the Atlanta Reign.
Syl gets the ever so unlucky pick of the Dragons.
So then starting off with winners round two, for me it is the Dallas Fuel and Houston Outlaws. Dallas and Houston, when it comes to land matches, this is a Houston game. Honestly, I want to see your insight on this because I mean Dallas are looking great right now. This is definitely a meta game where they're looking to be one of the stronger teams. But again, Houston also has a great Zarya Diva player in Dante. They have Sojourn covered by Merit. Pelican can play Genji to an absurd degree. Like, Houston has so many pieces that work so well together, as does the Dallas Fuel. Personally, myself, I am going to be giving this to the Houston Outlaws, which seems weird. I'm going to give it to a 3-1, but I think that the Houston Outlaws, when it comes down to LAN, they just have the number of the Dallas Fuel.
Yeah, but do they have Hanbin though? I really don't think so.
They
So
got
I think
Dante.
in in that match, oh, you're not comparing Dante to Hanbin. Oh no.
I
I'm
am
sorry you think that.
Dante for real MVP.
But Hanbin has been unreal, almost untouched on that character, the character of Zarya. and
He's about to be touched a
one of the best.
lot real soon.
Uh, I really don't think so.
You can take that
Like
statement
this,
in many ways as you want.
sure, but yeah, Hanbin puts up unreal stats and really just puts this team on the back, which is incredible to say when you're talking about the Dallas Fuel, which has players like Fielder, Fearless, Sparkle, Doha.
But who are they going
So
to be
many
playing?
great players, and
Fearless
yet
or
they're all care.
Hanbin?
What?
Who are they going to be playing then? Fearless or Hanbin? I mean, like you bring up Fearless. I mean, what's the point of playing Fearless when you have Han?
Well, he carries them on the bench, of course.
I
But
don't know,
yeah,
man.
anyway.
It's land Dallas Fuel. It's land battle for Texas.
Hanbin could probably play Zarya blindfolded and still be better than Dante.
I don't know. I mean, Dallas London though.
Allison, ooh yeah, that's why I
I
think.
think Hottie's carrying this game.
Oh no, they're they're getting knocked out instantly.
Yeah, he's carrying him to the L.
There's not really much a Spitfire can do against like the number one seed. I mean, uh, it's going to be obvious why the Fuel pick a team like the Spitfire when they get eventually just get 3-0'd. That's my thoughts on that.
Well, I mean, again, like you have to think London when it comes to playoffs. This is the first playoff
Generally,
they've been in since season one, and look what happened when they were in season one. They were the underdog. They were in this not very good position, and
but
they
let's talk.
won the inaugural season.
But let's talk about like this year though. What have they done in like any tournament? And they beat a team. I can't remember what it was. Maybe was it Toronto?
Find me a stage in an
I don't even
inaugural
know.
season where they did good in 2018. And they were in the same position as they were in inaugural season. This is a this is an
Bro,
opportunity for
that's
London.
literally a different game.
This is the opportunity for London to repeat what they did 4 years ago.
Yeah, okay.
Like it's not gonna happen, but it's just the fact that there's the
What's the
possibility.
next game we have to talk about?
The Atlanta Reign versus the Seal Dynasty. An absolute joke of a match. Seal is going to be winning this. I think I got to go with a 3-0 for the Dynasty. I think Reign, when it comes to playing characters like Hawk on Zarya and Diva, you would think this is a Reign metagame. But right now, Seal's against Smurf, who is one of the best tanks
Yeah, he's
in the
literally
league
like
right
right
now.
next there against like right next to the Hanbin, the two
So
goats.
yeah, clearly Seal has this. Atlanta might take a map, but I don't think it's going to get much farther than that.
Yeah, but on my side of the bracket, they have Dynasty versus Dragons, which is much more contested than that. This one, I mean, you have the goat tank or the second goat tank because I think Hanbin's better than Smurf, not by a long shot, but I definitely feel like he is better. But and the dragons, they also have lip, which I mentioned that damage isn't that much influential. But if all you did was watch dragons, you would definitely think that damage would be the most influential role. The things that Lip has done on that role has been like if Smurf carries the dynasty as tank and Hanman carries the field as tank, Lip somehow manages to find a way to carry the dragons as a DPS. I don't know how he does it, but he's been an unreal playmaker, and I think I'm honestly gonna give it to Dragons in a very close 3-2.
Following that up, we have the San Francisco Shock versus for you it's Houston, right? Let's start with you with the Shock.
Well, yeah, I think it's gonna be a very easy 3-0. There's not much contention. I think that this team is the worst out of all this. I think probably even worse than the Spitfire. Uh,
Are you
they
saying?
just don't.
Oh no, it's Florida. Never mind.
Yes, I was wondering when you're gonna figure that out. It is the Mayhem. I think they might even be worse than the Spitfire considering their seed because we don't really have good indications where they're going because I don't think play-ins offer a very good indication. My reason for them being in Winners Round 2 is very flawed too, and why the Fuel didn't pick them, I don't know. I feel like in my mind I just like thought, oh, Fuel beat Spitfire, so Fuel will take Spitfire again, and then that just kind of left Mayhem to be the next one. But if this does happen, I mean, Shaq will probably win the next one since, regardless of which team comes here, they're not going to pick the Dragons. At least I hope not. This Shock is not one to pick the most fierce option. I was going to go play a little bit conservative, choose a safer opponent, and it just so happens that in my pick'em it's the Mayhem. But even if it was the Atlanta Reign, they probably would have picked them as well.
I agree. London, not Lon- Shock would easily take either Spitfire or Mayhem or even Rain, whichever of the three. And I do think that it would all be the same way. If Shock were against the Rain, I think it might be a tiny bit closer. But regardless, I don't think Rain could pick a map off of the Shock right now. Neither can London, and neither can the Mayhem. We're both going with 3-0 here. London getting 3-0'd by the Shock, Mayhem getting 3-0'd by the Shock. Lastly, though, for the winners is the Gladiators taking on, for me, the Shanghai Dragons, and for you, the Houston Outlaws. I think that either way you look at this, the Gladiators versus either the Outlaws or the Dragons, this could be a fun match for either way. So, but let's talk about your thoughts on your prediction of the Gladiators versus the Outlaws.
I'm gonna make mine very brief because I think your match sounds a lot more fun than mine does. Yeah, I think Gladiators, they're part of the upper echelon, I feel. Houston is kind of knocking on that door, but they were never able to actually get invited to it, and they got thrown out, and they just had to sit outside and cry because they were never able to achieve the greatness that a team like the Gladiators have. Multiple titles this year, multiple MVP candidates in Kevster and Shu really just shows what this team has accomplished. I think any team in winners or any team that they would have picked in winners round two, they would have beat anyways.
Yeah, I agree with. Because, I mean, Gladiators are coming in this with the most momentum. You know, every tournament they've been in this year, they've won. They won Kickoff Clash, they won Midseason Madness. They didn't make it to Summer Showdown. And here they are in the playoffs as reigning champions over the season. The only team to win a title this season that isn't the Gladiators is the Dynasty, and that's only because the Midseason Madness was. Or no, was it Kickoff Clash? Yeah, Kickoff Clash was a regional tournament, meaning Seoul and the rest of the APAC played on their own, and the West region played all together as well. And I do have to give it to the Gladiators when it comes to Houston. When it comes to Shanghai, I mean, this is a tough one because you have Kevster and Happy on the Gladiator side. On the Dragon side, you have Lip and Fleta, or Lip and Who Are You. Amazing DPS matchup here. Reiner versus Void is another really good matchup. And then you also have Izzyaki and Li Gong versus Funny Astro, Shu, and Skewed. Like, I think that this is a team matchup that is just probably one of the most exciting. Because, I mean, like,
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was saying.
like,
Like,
this is.
like, I honestly wish it goes that route, seeing the Gladiators face the Dragons in one way or another, because that sounds like a pretty awesome match. Because every role is stacked on each team, and there's no telling. You could predict any way, like literally any score, and I would say, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, and that's what makes it so hard to predict because really you could pick anything and it makes sense. It's not like
Yeah.
the Shock against the Spitfire where you could really only say Shock gets the 3-0. Like you could say 3-1, but like outside of that, like nothing else is in the realm of possibility. With Shanghai Gladiators, you have a ton of possibility, and it's a real struggle to predict. But personally, myself, I have to give it to the Shanghai Dragons. I think that Shanghai, when it comes down to it, I feel like it's going to come down to Kevster and Lip. Kevster is the playmaker of the Gladiators. Lip is the playmaker of the Dragons, and I think when it comes down to it, Lip is better than Kevster, and that's gonna give Dragons just that little bit of an edge to eke out the victory against the Gladiators.
Yeah, you took the words out of my mouth. That is exactly what I was thinking.
So moving forward with the winners, here's where it gets really weird for us. I have the Houston Outlaws versus the Seal Dynasty, and I think this is where we can agree that this is where Houston would crumble if they even made it this far. I don't think they could beat the Seal Dynasty. I think that there's definitely possibility, but Prophet just way too good of like a Genji and a Sombra player compared to Pelican. I mean, you have a little bit more of a wiggle room with Fitz versus Merritt, because Merritt is easily one of the best hit scans right now. Smurf versus Dante, it's clearly Smurf to a close degree, I feel. I definitely don't think that it's like a clear cut, like, oh, Smurf is 100% better. There's definitely opportunity for Houston to shine, which is why I'm giving it a 3-1 for Seal to win this.
I think this is also going to be a much exciting match. A Dallas Fuel versus Shanghai Dragons rematch. What are your thoughts about that match? How do you think it's going to go?
Dallas Shanghai, man, it's an exciting one. Dallas Shanghai are really tremendous teams. I think it's gonna really come down to that again, that damage line. Yes, Sparkle and Edison with Gurio possibly coming out on Circuit Royale. But outside of that, I mean, it's clearly going to be Edison Sparkle throughout most of it. I think it's going to come down. It's either going to come down to that or Void versus Hanman, which clearly Dallas wins out on. And I mean, it's just so hard to predict. It's going to sound weird, even though I was like hyping up Dallas. Personally, myself, I think that this is going to be a victory for the Shanghai Dragons. It's going to be a close one, but I think when it comes down to it, again, Lip versus Edison. Edison is honestly the weakest link of the Dallas Fuel. And that's what's going to give Shanghai that upper hand, because Lip is just going to be able to take him out, and the rest of the team is going to follow.
I think it's going to be really close, but I think Hanman is just such a difference maker in this. I think Lip's just easily the best, but you can't forget that Doha, Sparkle, and Edison, that damage line is still like one of the best in Overwatch League right now. And I think on the characters that I think the damage players that aren't Lip, whether it's Fleta or Who Are You, even though that the hit scan department I think is better on the Dragons, I think the flex department is much more better on the Fuel. So where they want to pull out a Genji, I feel like could really work well. And I think Hanbin is going to get the best of Void. I mean, I've seen Hanbin do so many unreal things on Zarya, like spawn camp an entire team by himself, basically. It's just, he's so good. And the support line, I think, is relatively even. Fielder and Izuyaki, that's a match to see. And, oh man, I'm having the Dallas Fuel win it out, but I'm really not confident in that decision.
Speaking of the Shanghai Dragons, for me, the Shock are going to be following up their matchup against London against the Shanghai Dragons. Again, this is a scary matchup for the Shock. When it comes to tournaments, facing those big threats is what knocks them out. That being said, Shanghai is another team that has been kind of slacking when it comes to tournaments. There's definitely a possibility for them to lose to the Shock, but I want to kind of look more towards both teams' tournament performances, and Shanghai has really only fell to one team, and that's Seoul, whereas Shock has lost to a couple of teams, mostly the Gladiators. And if Shanghai can beat the Gladiators, Shanghai can beat the Shock. I gotta give this a 3-1 victory for the Shanghai Dragons. Moving on, though, to our final matches of the winner's bracket. For me, it is Seoul versus Shanghai. I basically just want to say what you said in your winners round 2 with Seoul Shanghai truly is going to be probably one of the more enticing matches going into this, because these teams have such a history this season. They've always been neck and neck with one another, and here is where it's truly tested who's the best of APAC.
That would be really funny when it was round four because like is the match that has been most played throughout Overwatch League history, just in general.
I mean, I gotta say it's pretty obvious for me about something, and that's the winner. I gotta give it to Shanghai. When it comes to Seoul and Shanghai, this is really a culmination of both of their seasons, where both of these teams are going to be playing their hearts out and playing their absolute best. And with that being said, I gotta give it to Shanghai. I think when it comes to a team having their backs against the wall, Shanghai has been the one that's been able to do it better than Seoul has, and that's gonna give Shanghai the upper hand in the matchup.
Well, if yours is the battle of the APAC teams, mine is the battle of the NA teams because I have Fuel and Gladiators. They both stack up really well, but I think there is a clear winner, but I want to see what your thoughts are.
I don't know. I mean, these two are the juggernauts of North America. You know, Hanbin versus Reiner, Kevster and Happy versus Edison and Sparkle and Doha and Gurio, who we're never gonna see. I gotta give it to the Gladiators. I think that when it comes to tournament success, Gladiators are the ones that are more likely to have it.
All right, well, now I'm going to actually talk about my match. I'm going the opposite direction. I have Fuel winning in a 3-1 fashion. And now hear me out. So I feel like 5v5, it's all about who is the best player on each team. And Hanbin might be the best player in the Overwatch League. Now it's pretty bold of me to base a team on a single player, but I think that's just the way it is, especially for how powerful each tank is. But yeah, I think generally in the other departments other than tank, DPS can generally, I mean, Kevzer's a scary, he's a scary guy, especially on the characters like the Genji and something like that. But I think Sparkle and the rest of DPS, they match up well with it. And I think, yeah, will have to go up against Shu and other supports on the Gladiators. But think about Dallas Fuel. You have Fielder. It's not like he's gotten worse over the years. I just think a lot of people have just not been talking about it.
With that being said, that is all for this part of the bracket. For me, I have Shanghai entering the winners side of grand finals. You have the Dallas Fuel. Tune in next time to see who we see as being the possible teams to join our respective teams in grand finals. Thank you guys so much for watching this part, and we'll see you guys next time. Have a wonderful day.